Hey, good morning, everybody. This is the new podcast, New Elder Wisdom podcast with Council of the Third Way, Chronicle 2, conversations with my dear brother Kale, and in our tradition of seeing what happens when you mess with structures, we're going to flip the script and we're going to hand the position of host over to him today. And he's going to lead our conversation. So thanks for being here this morning. Aloha, my bro.
Aloha, Hawaii. Yeah, that's this is a fun one for me because I hardly ever got to. I don't think I ever have played host
No?
for these. Yeah, no, I am always like on someone else's thing.
Yeah.
And so now I get to I feel responsible. I feel like I should ask some really good questions. But yeah, first I just want to say thank you. Yeah, New Elder Wisdom is what's up. And there's so much of that too that I feel like, it was kind of a theme, of things that had come up over the weekend when I was at Leadership Summit for Sacred Sons. Just a little brief story. One of the men that has been coming around for the past few years or so, probably 3 or 4 years now, he's up there in his aging, and he wanted to be of service to the brotherhood, to the community, but he doesn't know what to do, right? As he steps into his getting older in this stage of life, this cycle of life, he doesn't know elderhood because he never had any growing up. And then he also had the question, what is it? And what do I need to do? And he kind of made the analogy of like, when you go to a restaurant, you put in an order so the cook knows what to make. But there's like, there's a menu. He knows the menu. He just doesn't know like what people would want. And then we had a ceremony that night, and turns into a longer story. But I think I just want to start there with you. What does it mean in our day and time to understand elderhood? What is elderhood? I have a few examples in my life that I look at. One of them, you, as being the elderhood coming back or rising into this day and time. So, yeah, what is elderhood?
Yeah. Thank you. And that, really the intention behind this podcast is to give attention to just that, and beginning with the recognition that the lineal traditions in the West have been severed, that there's been, a great forgetting, as we often, call it. And so much of the time when you and I have worked together, you would say we're going into uncharted territories, uncharted waters, unmapped places. And in a way, embracing elderhood in this age is to begin there, that to a large degree it's unmapped. And so much of what, these conversations and the monologues I've been doing on this channel are, I think, maybe building the boats to go out on unmapped waters, to begin to, and the boats are questions and queries, and to really resist putting something in a box and saying this is elderhood for you, but that it's a social task, a communal task to find out, and one of the observations I've been making so much about myself, I'm 50, and I really feel myself at the just the beginning, of moving towards elderhood. And I realize how much within myself is similar to adolescence, in that there's a great curiosity. There is, my body's changing, just like in adolescence, it changed so much. But that there's a real need to kind of pull away from what I'm being told is, and to begin to just cook it within myself a lot, you know. And so I actually came up with this term. I was writing a monologue last night called elder essence, which is a combination of adolescence and elderhood, which is the time I find myself in developmentally. Is I'm in elder essence, like this unfolding, you know, this metamorphic way towards something that you know, maybe is asking, you know, to be new, um, to be renewed, you know, just like it's a new old way because there was the old way, and you know, through colonization and um, uh, you know, all the things that transpired to bring about this fierce individuality required cutting off, you know, what was old. And
Yeah.
you know, so just to me, elderhood is to stay in curiosity and learning for as long as I can, and then offer the support. You know, the difference being is that I've gained some mastery in some areas of life over the past 50 years. And so that would be the difference between adolescence and this process of unfolding. Um, and so to find new ways to apply the mastery and to allow the mastery to continue to um, expand and learn from itself. You know, been doing a lot of going back to the early lessons of my studies in somatics and such. So that's a little bit, you know.
Yeah, spatial dynamics.
Yeah, yeah.
That's yeah, I've been the beneficiary of those teachings that you've received, and yeah, just to speak to it, the elder essence. That's it's awesome. It's because they like check this cup out, spirit ecology.
Mm.
Yeah, my
Take
mom made that.
Get the
Hmm?
course. I was gonna just say, get the course, folks. Is it still hosted on my Kajabi?
Yeah, I paused it actually, but because I want to bring out round two, series two, which is more in depth and gives it more breadth. But yeah, in the spirit ecology too, just in the understandings that I've received with the medicine wheel from west black, north red, east yellow, south white, above blue, below green, and within purple. But it's pretty cool because those colors too are also the different life stages. And you know, indigenous wisdom keeps things pretty simple. You know, starting small, keep it simple, be consistent. You know, those types of things. But the coordination of the colors, like black to yellow, you know, west to east, and then north to south, red to white. Um, and I know that you carry those colors too in your own way. But in those life stages, like the beginning is the west, and then the adolescence, and then the adulthood, then the elderhood. And so the elderhood and the adolescence are right across from each other. So there's a large part in the teachings of how the elders are needed for the adolescents to learn these things, but they also mirror each other in different ways. So you speaking to elder essence like really like resonated with me and struck. It was a good one. I was like, oh, this is spirit ecology at work. Thank you, man. That is beautiful. I have more questions. And so we spoke on that elderhood. You've been doing the monologues. It's wonderful. I got to listen to some of them. But I would say, what was the moment or that season in your life when you had a depth of understanding that spirit is there, land is there, air, water is there, and they're not separate things? How did you come to this understanding? Because that's how I see you move.
Yeah, you know, I would say so much of it has been similar to the dynamics that we observe in expansion and contraction. And I was blessed very early on to, I was born in an urban environment and then moved a to the country. And I remember early, I think I was 7 or 8 years old, just I would go and there was a fern gully, and I would just lay in there and just watch the trees and clouds, you know, for a long time. And yeah, just I have a real remember of innocence, you know, like what it's like to be in an innocent observation where there's no separation. You know, there's just everything at once in an easy way. And then I was also blessed to spend time in Quaker congregation, where the only agreement is that everyone will be quiet.
Yeah. We're whispering now.
Yeah, we're whispering now, and that no one is elevated. There's no preachers, just everyone is the vessel and capable of bringing through the message. As a young child, I remember coming up into the congregation because we would be in our Sunday school, and then come up for the last, I think, 20 minutes of worship, of silent worship. I remember the substance of the silence, and that something was there. And I got to try on prayer for the first time, and to see quickly that the technology works. And so, it's, and then, moving from that stage of my life, I was quickly tossed into, what I would consider to be the culmination of Western madness in terms of public school and athletics and competition and viciousness. And so the innocence was torn, so to have these constant contextual polarities, like, Elder Essence, has continued to educate me in my own spirit ecology and the nature of things, coming out of a slight contrarian mentality, to always what was presented from the world was like, that doesn't really reflect these times that I knew as full of so much spirit. So I just continued the movement.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the question was, but
good. Didn't matter. Yeah, it was just beautiful to hear you speak on it, the Fern Gully. Oh man, I know that movie Fern Gully.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's how I relate to what everything you just said. The substance of silence, bro, is beautiful. Yes. Oh man, awesome. That's a Hiyaka, that one.
Hiyaka.
Unfurling. Yeah, the kind of generative power. So Hiyaka is a goddess in the traditions here in Hawaii. She's the youngest sister of Pele, and yeah, a lot of people's, in the New Age spirituality, they all like to gather up their goddesses, from all over the world, and Pele is a big one. But they always forget about Hiyaka. She was actually the one that the trilogy was all about. She was the hero, the heroine, but she was the youngest one, the youngest sister, and she was really doing the bidding of her oldest sister and did her best, while at the same time Pele was very jealous and vengeful and created a lot of havoc and chaos and hurt her sister pretty badly by not doing what she was supposed to do in a timely way that she wanted. And so it was a big lesson about, in many ways, elderhood, or like the absence of. But yeah, and then I loved what you said about the substance of silence. Yeah, there's such a it's such an echo for me, when it comes to the understanding of the substance of silence, because a lot of the ways with song, right, and rhythm, it's like there is no beat without the silence in between. And then can you be the song after, when everything gets quiet? When, to me, because silence really means like you're ready, that you're ready to receive. If you're making too much noise and going around doing too many things, you're not able to receive it. But yeah, brother, it's beautiful. So I think in this time too, you've been able to, along the way with the questions, speak about who you are and what you've learned in a way. So it brings me to this one, which is you have the phrase of the settler's heart. What does that mean?
Mm. Yeah, the settler's heart. The generation of this identity really came from, our first week together, you know, because we had shared so much vulnerability, so much intimacy, and, so much culture you had given and given and given. And we then meet at the table, at the end to kind of have a little talk, get the indigenous talking to. And, and, we hit the point where the hurt came forward, you know. Um, don't come here and think that you have something for us. This is not your place to move. This is a home that has been torn, and we're working to get it back. And I had my nose flute and my learned how to do some things with the tea leaf, and had some songs and some thoughts and some ideas. And you had spoken a lot on orphan wisdom throughout the weekend. And so, I took it in, but to me, it was like there was like somewhat of an impasse, because a lot of the other guys, they get like small and like, and I'm just, I just watch bodies. That's how I, interpret situations. And then I was looking at the broader, what was going on, because it was 2020 and the culture wars were like raging, and you can't do this and this and this and this and this and everything that came along that was primarily identity driven, both in the commercialization and consumption of culture by the West, and also for the seeking of identity by the indigenous youth and elders who had worked so hard to remember, and where there was like a friction, a seam, a crack. And, for me, having, you know, also embrace, like, for a long time as a youth, I would identify as Rastafari, because there's a hint of orphan wisdom within it. And there's a universality. And I still encourage everyone to read Haile Selassie's memoirs, and important utterances, because he gave something to the world that is needed in terms of diplomacy and dignity. And it was also the end of something. It was the end of, he will be the last, the first and the last, because the Abrahamic distortion is also asking to be reborn, having been the instrument of so much tearing. And so, for me, in listening, and you in a lot of ways brought me back to the land. I was in a new place, didn't know the land. And so you stimulated this curiosity and this relationality, because I had always been a student of metamorphosis, and what we call, the closest thing to indigenous thinking in the West is phenomenology. How does a phenomena speak to us? And so you gave it a sweetness. And so I just wanted to be as authentic as possible, with my surroundings. And so I began to, just introduce myself. I'm a settler here, and I would like to cooperate with you, and find a way with you. And it, within the word of the settler, there's a settling in, like, this is who I am, and being good with that, and actually seeing it as a generative place to move into what you speak of, to seek what they sought, not what they found. And so, to be able to come to dawn after dawn after dawn, as in that truth of identity, um, you know we would find the ancestors are not bigoted in any way. They're just looking for authenticity and sweetness and truth, and a willingness to be with what's raw, and that which is from the beginning, and that which is, constantly coming forward with their guidance and help, and not in a worshipful way, but like, hey guys, we're here, let's do something. It can be beautiful and fun and cultural and rich. So, what I ask people that come into the teaching, and it's not nearly as romantic as becoming Kanaka. I mean, being part of a lineage.
Romantic.
Or to become a curandero or whatever it is people are looking for.
Yeah.
But it, for me, it actually begins to be a pathway to the great tearing, because some of my bloodlines, which are many, I often say I'm an American mutt, primarily from Scottish Ireland, some Germanic, and then like Eastern the Ural Mountains, and southern Russia, those kind of places. And we were the first ones to get Rome's foot up our ass, bro. I mean, they would come and cut down our sacred groves, and everyone became Roman. Stephen Jenkinson talks a lot about this, about how the identity was torn even when the Romans left. You were a Roman.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's the beginning of the settler's heart. And then, my fascination also with the migrations of poor white people in the United States, the Dust Bowl, those kind of things, is this constant upheaval and movement of, the less melanated endowed.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about that, the settler's heart.
Yeah, just a little. That's great. That's awesome. Just a little bit. How often in the day do you think about the Roman Empire? I don't know. Try me. I throw out a number. That's beautiful, brother. Thank you. That's so. Yeah, just so well spoken to in so many ways. It's struck memories, to come back within me too, of the time that we were together in the beginning of our meeting, and who I was at that time too with you, and the interpretations that I had for me that were given to me at that time was also a way for me to really express it with my unique voice amongst men that were coming with the intention of connecting to brotherhood, and also being able to go into ceremony in ways they've never experienced before in their life. And so it was the same for me. I wanted to connect to brotherhood. I wanted to be a part of ceremonies that I had never been a part of in my life. Even though I was cultural host and giving, my understanding of the things that were brought to me, I also saw a lot of what you speak on, the cultural war that had begun long ago. I'm Scottish too, and Irish and German too. So it begins there for me in many ways because of that mixture that for the indigenous here, Native people here. And then for me on that side of things as a Kanaka, it's like America is my Rome, and yeah, thank you for speaking up to all of this, because it's got me in that place as well. And the plants and the animals, the elements, land, air, and water, natural law, is not a thing that we all get to claim, but it encourages us to belong to, that way. And I think I don't know, I think a lot of what's happened in our society is not only the removal and the severance, right, that you speak of, but also the things that have happened as the repercussions or collaterals of damages and we're the recipients of that. And you spoke on that too. So this kind of leads me into my next question, because you are a mastered over 10,000 hours, you know, movement and therapy practitioner, and you're certified. Like, you're certified. You know what I mean? What does that mean? You know, what does it mean for, you know, people that have a misunderstanding about their own bodies, especially when it comes to culture, a culture of disembodiment? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about this yesterday about bodies in general and the human body and just the sheer amount of variation. Because compared to the rest of the species on Earth, you know, supposedly we're all one species of human being, and this kind of variation that you see in shapes and forms to me is, you know, very palatable. You know, it's a to me the body is an agreement. Okay, put me in, coach, I'll go. You know, we came, and to
Mm-hmm.
me it's a contract of habitation, a place to move through this world in. And it, you know, it's also, I believe, less so like keeping the score but keeping the story. And I remember, like, especially as a teenager, because I would be in Black communities and white communities, I noticed how much, like, the people that I admired in the Black community, there was very little movement. There was a lot of stillness, and it was always very deliberate movement,
Mm.
you know, within the stillness. I go back in the white community, there was a lot of like ticks, like fake yawning and hair and just like all this like unnecessary movement. And that was like just like a little marker when I was young. And then, you know, for me, movement, I always loved dancing. You know, I remember me and my buddy Liam Murphy in 7th grade at the very first middle school dance. You know, we're the only boys on the dance floor. We broke the ice, and the gals came out, and so movement was always something that invigorated me. I was an athlete, you know, uh, despite some physical deformities in my feet. I always really pushed hard and felt best when I was doing so.
Mm.
And then years later, you know, I was a stonemason for a long time, and so I say I have a PhD in gravity first, and
Yeah.
then that faded around the age of 35. I went back to school to become a somatic therapist, and studied
Mm.
for 8 years uh, under one man, Jamin McMillan, at the Spatial Dynamics Institute. And,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of misconceptions about the body, which I think is where the question started, you know, Jamin inverts everything. The movement doesn't begin in the physicality, but it actually begins outside of you as a thought. And that becomes a ripple in the waters that you either then follow or push through. You know, so in this contract, this agreement, this story, um, and, you know, going back to our last question, the inheritance of the tearing and the forgetting, bodies change and carry those
Yeah.
stories in so many ways, you know, however it comes. And we've seen so much, you know, how this language of the body is present in the men we work with the women we work with. There's a story there that can be led back. And so I would say, like, you know, the biggest, you know, misconception is that you need to compartmentalize and find a system, and that's your system for life. But that we need to continuously be studying movement our whole lives to keep ourselves fresh and to learn to receive information in new
Mm.
ways. Um, you know, studying movement helped me to realize that my brain is not the best generator of information. But is something that is received, and I can stimulate that conversation in movement. You know, the other day I was looking, I love this poster of, I think it's like maybe an old Hawaiian tourist poster, and there's a woman in her t-skirt and a lei, and that's it, you know, and then she's on her knees, you know, and she's like this, you
Mm.
know, the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think I saw that like right before I was preparing to come to Hawaii. I'm like, oh yeah, that to us that is a limb of receiving information
Mm,
in my mystery tradition. So yeah, to bring it in, to bring that which will be carried by me in from the heights,
mm,
from the horizon,
mm,
from that which is beyond me, and I will carry it and I will incorporate it into my belonging. So, movement is often seen as a way to control the body, and I think it is better approached as a way to inquire the body for the wisdoms that it keeps.
mm,
And then ideally, we have both, because I then unfolded another layer by going super intensely through the way that you guys brought forward functional movement, um,
mhm,
and biomechanics unfolded another piece for me, um, in the contraction, so I came in like very probably too expanded, and had to abandon because I was in so much pain when I came to
yeah,
physically. And so to come in such a indigenous way, to follow the pathways of the fascia as
mhm,
rivers, because I know all those as maps outside
mhm,
the body, because for everything you see there is something outside. um, and I think the best way for people to start thinking about movement is thought, movement is feeling, movement is prayer, movement is the connection that we're looking for with self and the observable world. And something can be illuminated when we begin to query the world through movement. Mm.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah, bro, that's wow. Dancing. Yes, I've I shared this before with you. Yeah, I just wanted to connect to the depths of understanding you with your PhD in gravity and then in levity therapeutics, and it's just awesome the duality that continues to be shaped and shifted as from your knowledge and how you share it, and then still being open to receive, you know, new ways of perspective or interpretation, or however, when it does come to, you know biomechanics and functional patterns and things like that. Because my route first, when it came to movement as well, was in sports, athleticism at a young age, and that's kind of part of the indoctrination, yeah, with American public schools. It's like, hey, you got your football, your soccer, your basketball, your track and field, your
That's right.
this and that.
Stop playing, start competing right now.
Yeah, exactly right now. And then it wasn't until I went to Halal and cultural school and started to learn hula that the understanding of movement and is its gift of embodiment, really showed up for me, and doing these poses, these postures in our movements. And even in the one you're talking about, the woman is holding a feathered rattle,
Hmm.
and she has it in her hand, and we call that uli uli. And so I got to learn, I mean, the movement within for the body, within the body, but also with the implements, like using bamboo puili and stones and feathered rattle and sticks, like all these really kind of like primal instruments, not primal in the way people think of it, as like a diet or a move, like, yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
weird.
primary, they came first.
Exactly. That's what I say it that way. Is, yeah, primary, like primus, first nature, and like tapping into that. Beautiful about it. What and can you speak to like that culture now of the disembodiment that we see, and how that's interpreted with some of the things, that you've already brought forward, like the spirit ecology and the settler's heart and the somatics. Like, what are the consequences now of this culture of disembodiment?
Yeah, the consequences of disembodiment are manifold. They manifest in, if someone is not inhabiting their body, they're much more likely to be abused. Um, they're much less likely to find their purpose, because there are some things that are only carried here. You know,
Mm,
within this treasure box. I think that it also leads to a materialization of the body and a consumption of the body in a way. Right?
Mm.
You know, always looking for something, even like in this path of looking for elderhood, right? Constantly coming against this, like, oh, look at the beard, no more red, like, this, there's the way the body is linked with the loss of elderhood is that we're supposed to be looking for this perpetual youth, so I actually see biohacking as a form of disembodiment, which a lot of people don't like when I say, it's not that it's not,
Keep
there
saying
aren't,
it.
that there aren't, sure, there's tools there, and gifts, but
Sure.
this is not some system to be hacked. And so the relational is lost by saying, this is what you're going to do now. This is the chemical you need now. So to me, that's a disembodiment. Even hyper specialization to me is a form of disembodiment. Like people that like only deadlift. It's like, okay, you're training for deadlifting, but how does that apply to life? So to me, like over specialization, especially with the young people, and this is they're beginning to understand. So if you have a kid that shows good skills in soccer, we'll just say, a lot of time it's like everything soccer.
Yeah.
Right. And then they'll be prone to injury. They'll be prone to emotional rigidity. And they'll be prone to the inability to play, which, to me is so much of what's lost. Play is lost in gym class a lot of time. People that are not so in shape come from a lineage, a lot of people don't understand how poverty has affected the genetics of white people, so-called. And what we endured and how that's been, the jaws become much smaller. And there's some things there, unless you're German, then you get that nice broad. But the
Germans.
So
I love it.
So yeah, so there's so many costs, and then also the ability to like you can't. There's also such thing as over embodiment, and this leads to things like autoimmune diseases, where the body is saying, hey, not all of you supposed to, you need to be out there too. You need to be in the social realm. You need to be in the ritual realm. You need to be in the super sensible realm, and the body will begin to attack itself. But again, like, if I'm not in my body, it'll be much easier to disregard yours. And to be, empathy will be lacking.
Yeah.
And so that's why so much they're driving us into a two-dimensional world, and we give thanks for it today. Just like a biohack, we give thanks for this flat world today. We can be together and share thoughts and ideas, but ultimately most people are actually no longer living in a three-dimensional reality. And so the neurology begins to change, and and then you can keep going. Every problem is basically a disembodiment, right?
Sure.
To forget that this body that is supporting us right now is our body, and so it goes on and on. I think we've often said, it begins with the body because it's the commons. And, with Makoa Quest, you have the commons. Like, This is the commonality: pain, hunger, desire. It's all so personal, but it is shared. And so can we stretch beyond our own experience of that and move into it with others to understand through bodies, and then we smell each other's stink and get our tears and boogers on each other.
Oh my gosh. Wow, man. This is, I'm so glad I'm asking the questions. This is great. Yeah, so thank you. The next one that's coming up for me is, I've been able to gather so much understanding from you through esoteric knowledge, especially when it comes from scripture, or from this depth of Christianity that I wasn't familiar with, because I was on a different branch of that. And you have one that I like to speak on when I share with people some of the things you taught me. When I say your name is like, is the esoteric Christian animist, in many ways. But that's how I say, because I feel like that gives the most praise. Um, and so, what does that look like to you? What was that journey? How did you understand a shift of view through that lens of an earth-based tradition that the settler's heart understands wasn't brought into the lineages anymore because of that disruption, while also knowing the depth of spirit that is within the scripture, so to speak, right? Because it's I know for you it's a living word. It's not just something it's literal. So what does that mean to you?
Again, I would have to say it does go back to, time in Quaker congregation, because within the silence, someone is there who is as radiant as the sun, warm and giving, ever life giving. And then coming back to it, my mother, she gave me transcendental meditation when I was 16, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Yeah.
And so I learned to, began to learn to use like mantra to control my mind and such. And then also, growing up around Rastas, Jamaican, hill countrymen predominantly, there was a new interpretation of the scripture that was what was called an I science, a science of I, like if it doesn't clarify the I, then what is the point, and the degree that scripture matters within the communities of Rastafari is very varying. Some are like, the Bible is so boring and dry, which I have a tendency to agree with, but I think it's obviously held a lot of power for one way or the other. And then I really have to then come to the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, because he begins not with telling you what to think, but how to think and how to form what we call a true objectivity or a true watching of how the thought pictures arise when certain initiatory processes are gone through. And the first one, I'll just share the first one. There's 6 what they're called the protective exercises, which I've gone into a lot in my life. And the first one is to find something that is utterly meaningless to you and observe it until you feel satisfied that you've observed it well. And then notice if a feeling arises. And so the feeling of satisfaction is that of intuition, of a settling, right? A settling into the thought that one has received. And, I've listened to hundreds of hours of his lectures since, and it is a Christ-centered spiritual philosophy in that there was an evolutionary happening. And people, and we see this story repeated, right, on so many mythologies, like a virgin birth and 12 plus 1, a 13 moving together, and a disembodiment, whether it was a Horus that was cut into 13 pieces and scattered, and Isis went and gathered him back up. And in the skies too, you can see the 3 kings coming and following the procession up to the solstice, the winter solstice, as the sun is born again. And so for me to, there's a cultural aspect of being an esoteric Christian, of who, I speak to, inwardly. And then there's the processes and dynamics of creation that are gifted through the story. This, which is a story of a circle, of a medicine wheel, and of time, time well kept and noted and celebrated. And that evolutionarily, that which is being most suppressed by the religious ones who said they would come in a name, those aspects are actually highlighted in an esoteric path, because it is an inward path of relationality to the central warmth of ourselves, and so it's to cultivate the sun within. SUN, would be the simplest way, and it goes on and on and on. you know. But you know,
All the time or just sometimes?
well, that's like a good concept too to talk about, that the Almighty, right? This word, and like I like some of the times, we'll like scuff on that, and or like someone will use that, the Most High,
The
right?
Most High.
And it's
Yeah.
like, yo, bite your tongue now,
Mm, mm,
because I believe, in looking for elderhood, I know sometimes the elder is just sitting in the corner and radiating the sun,
yeah.
because he chose to bite his tongue rather
Mm,
than make a proclamation of that which is unattainable to the human consciousness, but
mm,
to emulate the qualities of the sun is a whole other game.
mm. Wow, man.
And I always see, like, when power is commanded, I really see this realm as it's a place of neutral magic. Anything can be taken in any way,
Right.
right?
Mm,
Any ceremony, like the true ceremonies to me can be used equally in the dark arts and the light arts, and it's the human being that makes the choice of which direction those things
mm,
go in. In herbology, a lot of time they'll call it a neutral plant. Like
mm,
hawthorn is considered a neutral plant because it needs the human being to decide where it'll go, where she'll move. And so when I see the power structures of the world that cause the most havoc,
yeah.
the most suppression of the human joy and culture of the heart, I see that they're dealing with the neutral magic because it has so much power. So what is on the other side? That's where my curiosity leads me in that realm.
Mm,
If you can utilize this magic for so much darkness, what else? What happens
yeah.
when the human being decides to turn that inside out and stop declaring what God is and ask her,
Mm,
what are you today?
mm,
You got something? No? Okay. I'm gonna go and rake the yard.
right. Oh,
you know.
man, beautiful. Just yeah, so much reflection on all those touch points. So much breadth, man. So much depth. Gosh. Another question.
Hey.
Yay. I like this because I
Mm.
don't have to say much. So the journey so far that we've been on in this beautiful, kuka kuka, you know, important types of conversations, storytelling, not just gossip, we're in that. And I wanted to bring these questions forward because these are questions that um, I bring up for myself to know too, because we've had these understandings, and the way that you talk is like, I get to find my own path along the way with you, which has always been beautiful. The invitation just in talking story of like, so this is kind of the lay of the land. And then I'm like, well, what's that? And that's been beautiful. It's been an honoring, to have that relationship with you and that conversation style that I don't receive all the time with people, because I'm in this position as a teacher for many people, as a leader to some, and as a ceremonialist, for others. And so my question for you now is, when it comes to these things of teaching and educating and maybe showing rather than telling, um, I see that as a beautiful burden, that many might attempt to carry, but few can sustain. And so I'm wondering to myself, how do you do it? How are you able to carry so much in your way? Not what's in your way, but in your way.
Yeah, because every time I stop, it feels like I'm gonna die, probably.
Mm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know? And it comes through, it's almost a feeling of diplomacy, like a diplomatic mission, responsibility
Yeah.
to carry it, and to continue to evolve. You know, a lot of people like want a system, and they'll first come into a coaching relationship with me and they want a system.
Yeah.
I say, well, we can do that, but I think it would actually be more helpful if we step closer to you to allow the ceremony of unfolding to be co-created between us. And so I feel like a good educator really is doing that constantly, knows when it's time to lead firmly and knows when it's time to co-create with the needs that are presenting themselves
Mm.
in the room. And you know, everything is in a timely manner, you know, and I'm able to carry it because I've had a very secure family life, you know, for
Mm.
25 years. You know, and we're going through big changes now too, adult children now. And, you know, me and my wife having to look at what it means to move forward for another 25 years. So that, you know, but it's been an enormous sustaining, grounding force in my life, even when it felt like such a burden, you know. To support and provide for from a young age. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was only I was 25. You know, so half my life being a
Yeah.
parent, and the responsibility itself keeps me in carrying it. And you know, brother, I'll be honest. You know, like I feel like, you know, there's the soldierly aspects of life that just require me to look at life at sometimes as war, and that I'm bringing nourishment to the front line. Sometimes I'm on the front line. And
Mm.
so I do have to come to that, you know, and you brothers helped re-stimulate that in me as well, to fight, you know, and to continue to fight, because there are these touch points and these connections. I mean, you've been a huge part of me being able to carry it, man. You know, so many times when I would just be like, oh man, it's just like, what the fuck? And you call me, you're like, hi, speak some poetry. Let's cry some tears. And you know, so you know, the man sharpening man is real, you know.
Mm.
And it can go the other way too, when bro is a road taken as a token can lead to broken. But you know, I haven't found that to be the case overall,
Hey.
you know. And that my brothers, especially here too, really carried me, you know, over the past year.
Yeah.
um and it feels like something I signed up for a long time ago. So
I
I
know
just
that feeling.
yeah, so I just try and keep with it. And you know, yeah, keep
Wow.
on keeping on.
Yeah. Keep on keeping on. Even when it feels like we can't go much further.
Yeah.
That brings me to, I have two more questions.
Okay.
Yeah. That brings me to the songs, because you are the song carrier. And I found that in this way that you speak on, you know, being able to sustain yourself through strong family life, half your life, you know, and then through it all, you've been a musician,
Yeah.
you've been a creator of songs, and then you have this one that I so dearly love, which is Long Long Road, amongst the many that you shared with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, share a little bit about that song, man. What is that one?
Ooh, that one. Yeah, I think it's what we, you know, we're just talking about, you know, coming out of the prayer and meditation, which is the greatest sustainer of all. It, is that we need to recognize that this isn't our first rodeo,
Mm,
that these relationships are not the first touch points of rivers, that it's a long road. You know, it's a long time we've been walking this road. And, you know, to me, it leads to a greater context for Kuleana, for responsibility and for celebration.
yeah.
Um, and then we can go through the verses a little. It's like it was
Mm-hmm.
so much of it was a reflection of our early experiences together. Moonlight and flames, we were there in
Mm-hmm.
that one. Right.
Yeah.
Once again men will gather, just like over the ages on the long, long road. um uh what is it? It's always hard for me to remember when I'm just speaking.
Tears will be falling.
Tears will be falling. Oh yeah, reflections and deeds.
Deeds.
Everything that we become bearing together, and tears can fall, and sorrow, grief, and joy. And we did that too. We've done that. We'll continue to do that one. Spirit, sunlit breeze. Just like, when you have the eyes to see and you see the support coming in, and how much spirit is carried in the dance between the sun and the wind, and how they move together, to bring life and information and love to the world. To me, they're really like the root of compassion. For me, is warmth and wind. um, and then yeah, man, answer your calling. Like, fuck, man, the hour is late, we know that. you know it's a long, long road, but now is now, right?
Yeah.
And then we start to get a little more into the esoterics, and then coursings and streams,
Yeah.
right? Crossroads encircled, right? This great medicine wheel, this ever-giving form, the crossroads encircled. And I feel so much of what we did was that, the coursings and streams of life, we come together for an event, and then when we you say, humans are good at creating gods, so we create the goddess of the circle. We stand in a circle, and then men would come at the crossroads of their lives.
Yeah.
This crossroad is encircled, brother. What do you have? We're here. We're
Yeah.
here. Are you? um Crossroads encircled. The thorn and braid, is a little bit of my own cultural dip. The thorn,
Mm-hmm.
that which is piercing, and then that which weaves together. The thorn and braid. Songs to remember, because the songs, and this is so much, coming from you, to change the music from just some personal expression, but to actually serve something, a ceremony greater than self, to trigger memory,
Yeah.
to spark it off. The thorn and braid, songs to remember. And I can be honest, that's what the process has felt like,
Mm-hmm.
of this cultivation of now, which is 20 odd songs, of the Hawthorne way. um, and then my womb and stone, we've been there. The bone is now hollow. It's time. It's time to come through. um, those are the original verses that we'll stick with today. And
Yeah.
it's a long, long road, that
Mm-hmm.
we've been walking. you know and it honors the flesh in it all. you know so yeah, the frogs taught me that one, people. So you should you should listen to them. We got
Yeah.
we have a beautiful little tree frog here, and it
Mm-hmm.
sings so pretty. It stays high because it knows, it wants to be a bird. It goes and hangs out with the hangs out with the birds to sing. And so yeah, for like I was in high school bands, and like would stop playing, play. I recorded like a reggae EP like 20 years ago, and music's always been there for me. It's always been my strongest form of prayer. I think it's another thing that sustained me,
Yeah.
to carry it on and to remind myself. It's like, oh, I wrote this 10 years ago. Does it? Oh, it's still right. Like,
Yeah. Still hits.
it still hits. It's sustaining me. So yeah, that willingness to be in a cooperative culture of the land and spirit is, I think, encapsulated in that song.
Mm-hmm. Wow, man. Right, it's been great just like watching you too, like listening to you and watching you as
Yeah.
you move through it, and like the gestures, the postures, and the smiles, and then like the faces. I was like, oh, this is awesome. Um, How's my questions been so far? Pretty good?
Yeah, man, it's great. I really appreciate this dynamic
Yeah.
so much. Because for years we tried to get this like we'd have these. They're like, we should record that. Be like, yeah, we'll do that. And then finally, 4 years later, here we are, and it's like, okay, yeah, it can't just be me just like interviewing this dear friend of mine. Like, let's get this natural flow going. So it feels
Yeah.
great, man. Thank you so.
Ta-da! We're doing it.
We're doing it.
Okay, last one. A
Last one.
little. So I asked, education and where you've been and how you perceive and how you see. And I asked for a song and you gave me. Thank you.
Mm.
Now I like to hear a story. I was. You told me many stories, but this one had come up for me over the weekend at the leadership summit with the Sons. And it was the story you had shared with me a while ago about the broken tool, God's broken tool. Right? And I have a reflection of it, or not a reflection. I have an understanding of it from the times that you told me, but I'd like to have a deeper understanding again. Could you share that story with me?
I thought you told me that story.
We kind of said both
Both
at the same
parts.
time.
Yeah, I think as a story of humanity is usually how I put it, not as like a scripture or something, but that going back to the body, there's a brokenness amongst human beings who are tools. They are actors of will forces upon the world, and through the hurt and through the confusion, the amnesia and anesthesia, the tool itself has become less effective of its true purpose. And that's what, just to give a little hint, next time when we switch the flow, we're going to go into what is a human being and is it a given next time when I'm interviewing. So, and then I was always touched by this. It's a Japanese art of repairing pottery with gold.
Yeah.
And
wabi sabi.
Wabi sabi, yeah, exactly. This that the breaking gives an opportunity, not only to just take the old piece and stick it back together so that it does what we want, but to leave a reminder there of gold, that the repair itself needs to be golden. And we only get there by going to those hard edges. It's like where we meet the people is at the crack. We meet right there at the edge, and their body, their tool has become dysfunctional in their lives, whether they're leading it astray into imbalanced living or causing hurt upon others. The tool itself is no longer functioning in the ways that it was first forged for. And so, the very first Hawthorne song, this cry, cry for the wounds of the world we cry. Rise, rise from the wounds of the world we rise, to me speaks of this willingness to engage the tool and maybe listen to the tool for a second and say, hey, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Maybe you have a new purpose.
Yeah.
Maybe once you were for tea, now you're for soup. Maybe once you were for, swords, now you're for plowshares, is of course that the form of a sword itself is a broken form because it's of what is come to symbolize and be utilized. Of course, are there beautiful sword arts? Yeah. Should those be known and practiced? Yeah. But then again, it becomes a neutral magic. What's a human being going to do with it? Right. So ultimately for me, to come to the story of the broken tool is to look at the body, not just in the ways we think it's not perfect, but in the ways that it's expressing itself in life that are causing disharmony. That are causing, you're plowing a furrow for carrots, but it keeps dumping and off this one jagged edge into the potatoes. So can we bring gold to the crack? Can we speak to the tool itself to see if there's evolution there, while still continuing the good work that the ancestors laid down in the forging of the first tool, the chipping. What do you call it? Knacking.
Necking, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that's what's there in the story, the broken tool. Yeah.
Man. Yes. Yes. So much of that. So yeah, just integration,
Mm.
so key to so much of what we do. But yeah, brother, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for these beautiful wonderings aloud and wanderings,
Mm.
opening of doors and pathways, corridors. So many memories that I get to, just kind of jump through the woods with you.
Yeah.
Back to some ferns.
Yeah, back to the Fern Gully.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so, yeah, and I just wanted to close it up now for us. It's been full meal. People listen to this one. Sheesh, I don't know. They're probably gonna be full for a few days until the next one. Which is good. Integrate all of that. So just in closing, my brother, is there anything else that you would like to say?
Yeah. I would just say, keep going, everybody, please. And it's good to try. Keep moving. And let's continue to find new ways of working together and finding, reconciliation, love, and forgiveness, and good expression of self. I would say definitely go check out the Now Academy over on a school platform.
Yeah.
I would also say, check out Makoa Quest and the good things that are happening on Maui. I would invite you to come check out the Hawthorne Way, which is my own offering on school. We're going to have multiple councils on there a week. It's ready to go, and we should be going live in the next couple of weeks as people begin to enroll. So it's brand new, yeah, so please, check it out and support this podcast and everything everyone under any banner is doing to show up in the cracks and lay some gold there. So
Yeah.
let's keep it going, man.
Beautiful, brother.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's
So it was
that.
said. That's
All right.
that.
Han Han
There it is.
Katu.
Love you all.
Love you.
Thank you.